I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
The order arrived without ceremony, but its meaning was unmistakable. Princess Anne had personally removed Tom Parker Bowles from the late Queen's private holiday estate, ending his access to a sanctuary guarded for decades as part of Elizabeth's personal legacy. A familiar name vanished from the guest register. Security instructions changed within minutes, and as one estate door was locked, a far more dangerous question swept through the royal household. What had Camilla's son done to force Anne's hand? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne did not hesitate when the estate's access register was placed before her. The register was the official record listing who could enter, stay overnight, or bring guests there. She found Tom's name, drew one firm line through it, and returned the pen. No speech followed. No apology softened the decision. The princess ended his standing invitation, vehicle clearance, use of the secluded cottages, and right to arrive with private guests. This was not a cancelled weekend. It was an indefinite removal. The estate mattered because Elizabeth had kept it separate from the public machinery of monarchy. Its private rooms held family letters, furniture, handwritten notes, and rituals belonging to the woman behind the crown, rather than the sovereign seen at ceremonies. Anne understood that distinction. She had watched her mother guard the place from curiosity, entitlement, and careless familiarity. Now she believed someone had crossed the boundary Elizabeth spent decades protecting. Camilla received the news in a private sitting room. An aide explained that Anne's directive had reached security and could not be delayed. The queen consort's face tightened. She asked whether Charles had approved it, then asked again when the aide avoided her eyes. Camilla understood the humiliation. Her son had not merely been refused entry, he had been formally erased from a place connected to the late monarch's memories. Charles felt the danger when the written order reached his desk. The directive described a breach involving the integrity of the late Queen's private household, meaning the trusted rooms, records, staff, and customs preserved from Elizabeth's personal life. The king read that phrase twice. Anne offered no further explanation, but her silence made the accusation heavier. Then Charles requested the underlying file. What he found linked Tom's removal to an object discovered inside one of Elizabeth's locked rooms, and the record suggested Camilla's son had not been alone. But before Charles could decide whether Anne had crossed a line, the people trapped inside the decision were forced to confront what the estate represented, and what each of them now stood to lose. To the public, the dispute appeared to be about access to a royal property. Inside the family, it was about belonging. Tom saw the estate as proof that his mother's marriage had finally brought him within the royal circle. Camilla saw his removal as a calculated humiliation. Anne saw something else entirely, a private inheritance being quietly absorbed by people Elizabeth had never chosen to entrust with it. Between those beliefs stood Charles, divided as king, husband, and father figure. Tom Parker Bowles had spent years moving carefully around royal life. He attended family gatherings, shared private meals, and stood near the edges of occasions that once would have excluded him completely. Yet he held no formal royal role, meaning he possessed no official position, duty, or authority within the monarchy. His place depended on personal welcome alone. That was why the estate mattered so deeply. Staying there had made him feel accepted, not merely tolerated. Tom received the removal notice while preparing for another weekend away. He read the opening paragraph twice, lowered the paper, and stared at the luggage waiting nearby. Then he asked the question that mattered most. Did his mother know Anne intended to do this? The answer did not come immediately. That silence told him more than any explanation could. Camilla confronted Charles before the day was over. She accused Anne of treating her son like an intruder after years of family dinners, holidays, and carefully managed inclusion. The queen consort reminded her husband that Tom had never demanded a title or public role. He had only accepted invitations that appeared to come with the king's approval. Charles listened, but he offered no promise. The monarch's silence left her feeling exposed, as though her son's place in the family had always been temporary. Anne felt no uncertainty. The princess had become the uncompromising guardian of the late queen's private world, especially the possessions and customs Elizabeth had kept apart from official royal ceremony. She held a handwritten note from her mother, naming those permitted to use the residence after her death. The document was not a legal decree, but a personal instruction. written to guide the family and protect the property. Tom's name was missing. Anne's responsibility was not. Tom insisted that someone close to Charles had verbally approved his stay, yet no permission appeared in the household record. That gap changed everything. A spoken promise could be denied, misunderstood, or stretched. Anne's written instruction could not. Then William learned that Tom's latest visit had involved a room sealed since Elizabeth's final summer. The prince understood at once that this was no longer a dispute over welcome. Something private had been disturbed. The removal was no longer simply Anne's decision against Camilla's son. It was the consequence of a visit that had crossed a boundary no one in the family could pretend had been accidental. The crisis had begun 3 weeks earlier, during what was supposed to be an uneventful private weekend. Tom arrived after dusk with a small party and instructions that the main cottage had been prepared for him. By midnight, a light appeared inside a room that had remained closed since Elizabeth's death. The next morning, a housekeeper found the door unlocked, a desk drawer disturbed, and one personal photograph missing from its usual position. That was the moment Anne stopped seeing carelessness and began seeing violation. Tom Parker Bowles believed he had permission to bring 2 private guests, yet the estate household had received different instructions. Staff had been told that Camilla's son would arrive alone, stay briefly, and leave without using the preserved rooms. That difference mattered, because the property was not operated like an ordinary royal residence. Its private areas were maintained as Elizabeth had left them, not prepared for visitors seeking an intimate glimpse of her life. Margaret Ellis entered the corridor shortly after sunrise and immediately knew something was wrong. The senior housekeeper had protected the late monarch's personal rooms for years, preserving them according to the family's instructions. She found the writing retreat open, a chair shifted from its usual place, and one drawer pulled slightly forward. Margaret froze in the doorway. Then she telephoned Anne directly rather than contacting Charles's household, because she knew who had been trusted to protect the room. Anne arrived that afternoon without aides. The princess walked slowly past the family photographs, the private correspondence, and the books Elizabeth had marked in her own hand. This writing retreat had been the Queen's personal refuge, a room where she read, answered letters, and stepped away from official royal duty. Then Anne noticed her mother's reading glasses displaced beside the locked desk. Her anger did not disappear. It changed into grief. Tom admitted entering the room when Anne questioned him through a documented household account prepared after the visit. He said the door had already been unlocked and claimed he stepped inside only to show his guests a part of the estate's history. He denied touching the drawer. He also insisted that no one intended to remove anything. The security record made that defense harder to accept. One guest had remained in the corridor for almost 11 minutes after Tom returned to the main cottage. Later, Margaret found the missing photograph in another sitting room. It showed Elizabeth beside a handwritten dedication meant for her family, not for strangers. Anne understood what had happened. Permission had been stretched. Privacy had been exposed. Responsibility was already being divided before anyone had fully accepted it. With the sealed room breached and Elizabeth's memory pulled into the dispute, Anne summoned Tom and Camilla to a meeting where family courtesy would no longer protect either of them. The meeting took place behind closed doors, with no press secretary, no household mediator, and no ceremonial politeness. Anne placed the estate register on the table between Camilla and Tom. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. When Tom defended his visit as a harmless family stay, the princess pushed the register toward him and delivered the sentence that changed the room. "You may have been welcomed by the king, but you were never given the right to enter my mother's private life." Anne had chosen a small drawing room where no aide could soften the exchange and no official recorder could turn anger into careful palace language. A press secretary normally manages public communication, while a household mediator helps contain private disputes before they damage the wider family. Neither was present. Only the 3 people tied to the breach remained, and every silence belonged to them. The princess opened a folder and placed each piece of evidence before Camilla and her son. She produced the unauthorized guest list, the security timeline, Margaret's written household report, and Elizabeth's restrictions governing the preserved room. Those restrictions were personal instructions explaining who could enter the space and how it must remain protected. Anne did not rush. She allowed each page to carry its own accusation. Tom Parker Bowles insisted that he had never intended disrespect. He said years of invitations had convinced him that the royal family finally accepted him. not merely as Camilla's son, but as someone trusted inside its private world. His voice hardened when Anne answered that acceptance did not create ownership. Tom leaned forward, wounded by the word, yet the princess refused to withdraw it. Camilla rose from her chair. The queen consort demanded that Anne stop speaking to her son as though he were a trespasser who had broken through a locked gate. She reminded the princess that Tom had entered openly and believed permission had already been granted. Anne remained seated. Her stillness forced Camilla to stand alone with her anger, and that calm control made the confrontation feel even more severe. Then Anne revealed what the earlier report had not fully explained. One of Tom's guests had photographed objects inside Elizabeth's writing retreat, including a page left near the desk. Private photography was strictly forbidden, because even an innocent image could expose family correspondence, names, or personal details never intended for public eyes. Tom stared at the documented account and admitted he had not known any photograph was taken. His shock appeared genuine. Anne accepted that possibility but delivered the harder truth. Ignorance might explain his failure, yet it could not remove his responsibility for bringing the guest inside. Camilla warned that Charles alone could decide who belonged on property connected to his family. Anne reached for another document. Camilla believed the king's position would overturn Anne's judgment, but the paper waiting inside the princess's folder revealed that Elizabeth had anticipated precisely such a struggle. Anne's strength did not come from rank alone. It came from a responsibility Elizabeth had placed in writing before her final summer. The memorandum was brief, personal, and devastatingly clear. The private residence was to remain protected from casual occupation, unofficial entertaining, and any use that transformed memory into privilege. Charles could govern the monarchy, but Anne had been entrusted with this sanctuary. For Camilla, the distinction felt like a trap prepared years before she knew she would need to escape it. Anne opened the document and let its language settle over the room. A stewardship memorandum was a written instruction, assigning someone responsibility for protecting property, records, and access, after the owner could no longer do so. Elizabeth had signed this one herself. It gave her daughter authority over preservation, household files, private visitors, and the estate's most personal residential areas. The princess had not seized control. She had inherited a duty. Charles controlled the wider royal property arrangements, including how official residences were maintained and used for the work of the crown. Yet his mother had separated this retreat from ordinary hospitality. She instructed Anne to enforce its restrictions without favoritism, even when refusing access might cause anger inside the family. That distinction mattered because the estate protected more than furniture. It protected Elizabeth's final private world from becoming a reward for closeness to the reigning monarch. Charles read the memorandum alone in his study. The king reached the final paragraph, removed his glasses, and placed every page flat against the desk. A secretary waited nearby, but he offered no instruction. He recognized his mother's handwriting, the pressure of her pen, and the deliberate care behind every sentence. He also understood the humiliation Camilla now felt. Her son had been excluded by a rule written before she could defend him. The monarch continued reading and found the line that destroyed any easy compromise. Elizabeth had added a handwritten warning that access must never be expanded merely to avoid domestic discomfort. She had expected family pressure. She had known affection might be used to weaken the boundary, and she had entrusted Anne to resist it. William spoke to Charles privately after reviewing the document. The prince warned that overturning his aunt would violate Elizabeth's instruction and send a dangerous message. That proximity to the king could defeat the late queen's clearest wishes. Charles knew the future monarch was right. Personal peace could not be purchased by breaking a promise to the dead. Charles refused to cancel the order. He did not announce it dramatically or summon the household. His silence became the ruling. The king's silence became his decision. And once Camilla understood that Charles would not reopen the gates, the consequences struck her household with a force no memorandum could soften. Camilla had expected resistance from Anne. She had not expected surrender from Charles. When the king confirmed that the removal would stand, she dismissed her aides and sat alone beside an untouched tea tray. Beyond the door, calls were being canceled, luggage was being redirected, and Tom's planned weekend was disappearing from the household calendar. Yet the practical humiliation was only the surface. What wounded her most was the realization that Elizabeth's private boundaries still carried more authority than her own place beside the monarch. Tom Parker Bowles lost more than a single visit. Staff canceled his upcoming stay, cleared his belongings from estate storage, and informed security that any future entry would require Anne's personal written approval. That instruction meant the princess would have to authorize him directly before the gates could open again. His familiar access had vanished. Even the small signs that once made him feel included were being carefully removed. Camilla felt the separation immediately. Household staff treated her official position and her son's private status as two different worlds. The queen consort remained the king's wife and continued to hold public duties beside him. But Tom gained no automatic rights through that marriage. That distinction mattered because the monarchy could not allow family closeness to become permanent access to protected property. For her, however, the rule felt less like order and more like rejection. Camilla confronted Charles after the final cancellations reached her office. She told him his refusal to defend Tom had made her family appear disposable, welcomed only when convenient, and excluded the moment royal memory became involved. The king answered quietly. Defending her son would require him to ignore the breach and overturn Elizabeth's written instructions. Charles understood her pain, but he would not purchase peace by betraying his mother's trust. Tom telephoned Camilla before she could respond. He heard the strain in her voice and apologized for placing her between her son and her husband. She tried to reassure him, yet she could not say Anne had been wrong. That silence hurt him more than the removal notice, because it confirmed that even his mother now understood the weight of what had happened. Then the crisis deepened. The guest who took the photograph admitted in a documented statement that the image had been sent to a private group chat. For several hours, a page from Elizabeth's sealed room had existed beyond royal control. William's team traced the recipients and confirmed that the photograph had been deleted from every known device. Yet the prince knew deletion could not erase the danger. One careless image might have exposed private handwriting, family names, or memories never meant to become public material. Tom finally stopped defending himself. He understood that Anne had not acted out of cruelty. She had acted because his failure had placed Elizabeth's private world within reach of strangers. Stripped of his mother's protection and the king's silence, Tom requested one final private meeting with Anne, not to regain the estate, but to confront what his mistake had truly cost. There were no lawyers in the room when Tom met Anne again. No queen consort beside him. No king waiting to overrule the outcome. He arrived carrying the copied photograph his guest had taken and placed it face down on the table. For the first time, he did not speak about permission, status, or misunderstanding. He told Anne he had entered a room that was not his to enter, and exposed a memory that was not his to share. The princess finally listened. Tom Parker Bowles had requested the meeting at Anne's private residence, choosing ground untouched by Camilla's anger or Charles's authority. A private residence was simply a personal home rather than an official palace used for state duties. He had asked that neither his mother nor the king attend. Tom knew that unless he spoke without protection, every word would sound like another attempt to escape the consequence. He explained how the weekend had changed. The visit became casual, the rules felt distant, and his guests began behaving as though the estate were an ordinary family home. Tom admitted that he failed to stop them because he wanted to appear confident, trusted, and fully accepted. In that moment, he treated restricted royal space as hospitality he could offer. He understood now that it had never belonged to him. Tom then confessed what had driven that failure. Being Camilla's son had often left him unsure whether he stood inside the royal family or permanently beside it. He attended private gatherings but carried no title. He shared moments of closeness but held no guaranteed place. The estate had seemed like proof that he was finally more than a tolerated guest. Anne understood exclusion more than he expected. The princess told him that belonging was not proved by entering every room. It was proved by knowing which doors must remain closed. Her anger softened when Tom accepted the permanent removal without asking for access to be restored. For the first time, he was not bargaining. He was taking responsibility. Tom handed Anne a signed statement naming every person who had received the photograph. A signed statement was a written record accepting responsibility and confirming facts that could later be checked. His account allowed the household to verify that the image had been deleted from every known device. He also surrendered the remaining copy. Then Anne revealed the truth about the missing photograph from Elizabeth's room. Margaret had moved it after discovering the open door because she feared other objects had already been disturbed. Nothing had been stolen, yet the relief did not erase the violation. Anne promised to tell Charles that Tom had faced the truth honorably. She also made one boundary clear: forgiveness would not reverse the order. The private apology repaired part of the human damage. Yet when news of the removal escaped the palace, the family's painful reckoning became a national argument over inheritance, privilege, and loyalty. By morning, the locked estate gate had become the image defining Britain's newest royal fracture. Broadcasters called it a defense of Elizabeth's legacy. Critics called it a deliberate humiliation of Camilla's family. Outside Buckingham Palace, spectators gathered beneath umbrellas as news alerts repeated the same extraordinary sentence. Princess Anne had removed the Queen Consort's son from the late monarch's private retreat. What began with a disturbed room now forced the country to decide whether blood, marriage, or duty determined who truly belonged. The palace confirmed that Tom Parker Bowles no longer held independent access to the residence. A palace confirmation was an official statement, issued to establish the basic facts without exposing private family discussions. Yet officials refused to explain what had happened inside the sealed room, or release Elizabeth's personal memorandum. That silence protected her correspondence, but it also allowed every broadcaster and newspaper to fill the unanswered space with judgment. Commentators called the removal a defining test for Charles's blended family. The dispute mattered because the king had spent years presenting unity between his royal responsibilities and Camilla's relatives. It also mattered because Elizabeth's written wishes represented continuity, the belief that promises made by one sovereign should not disappear merely because another now wore the crown. The country was no longer debating one weekend visit. It was debating whether closeness to the monarch could overpower the dead queen's boundaries. Camilla watched the first television bulletin from a quiet breakfast room. The presenter described Anne as the unyielding custodian of Elizabeth's private world. The Queen Consort remained still until Tom's name was mentioned, then reached for the control and switched off the screen before his photograph appeared. She could accept the decision in private. Hearing her son reduced to the symbol of royal entitlement was harder. Anne received the morning newspaper at her desk and left it folded. The princess felt no triumph in the public support forming around her. Every headline pulled her mother's preserved room further into a spectacle Elizabeth had spent her life avoiding. Anne had defended privacy, yet that defense had made the private space famous. One front page captured the public mood with brutal simplicity. Beneath an image of the closed estate gate stood the headline, "Anne draws the line." The words transformed the princess from a grieving daughter into the family member willing to enforce a boundary others had feared to defend. Outside Buckingham Palace, a woman carrying flowers for Elizabeth spoke during a live broadcast. "A private room should remain private, whoever your mother married," she told the reporter. The sentence spread across afternoon coverage because it reduced the entire crisis to one painful truth. Charles watched public opinion settle behind Anne and began preparing a final family statement. The king understood that his words would decide whether Tom's removal remained a humiliation or became a lesson the monarchy could survive. The country had delivered its judgment on Anne's action, but only Charles could transform the family's embarrassment into a final decision about responsibility, forgiveness, and the limits of royal belonging. Charles gathered Anne, Camilla, and Tom in the same room where the dispute had first become unavoidable. This time, there were no accusations waiting on the table. The king confirmed that Anne's removal order would remain permanent. Elizabeth's private residence would continue under her protection, and no family connection would override its restrictions. Then he turned to Tom and acknowledged his apology. The gate would stay closed. The mistake would not be erased, but neither would one failure be permitted to destroy the family around it. Charles formally endorsed his sister's stewardship authority. That authority meant Anne remained personally responsible for preserving the residence, controlling access, and enforcing Elizabeth's written wishes. The king confirmed that only those named in his mother's instructions could use the protected rooms. Affection would not create permission. Marriage would not erase boundaries. Even royal closeness would stop where the late queen's trust began. The monarch also approved stronger rules across the family's protected properties. Guests would require written authorization, access would be recorded, private photography would remain forbidden, and any breach would trigger immediate suspension. These changes mattered because one informal invitation had nearly placed Elizabeth's correspondence beyond palace control. They also proved that the monarchy had learned something painful. Tradition survives only when someone is willing to enforce it. Camilla struggled to accept that her son's exclusion would never be reversed. The queen consort began to challenge the permanence of the ruling, but Tom stopped her. He told his mother that defending him again would transform his mistake into her rebellion. Camilla heard the finality in his voice. For the first time, she allowed the matter to end without demanding that Charles choose between his wife and his duty. Anne looked directly at Camilla and explained that the decision had never been designed to punish her marriage. The princess had acted to protect a promise made to their late mother, and Sovereign, the reigning monarch who had entrusted that private refuge to her care. She would have made the same decision against anyone who crossed the boundary. Charles then accepted his own responsibility. He admitted that informal family arrangements had blurred limits Elizabeth had made clear. The king's confession removed the accusation hanging over Camilla without weakening Anne's order. Tom had crossed the line, but royal uncertainty had allowed him to believe the line was movable. Tom accepted that he would never regain private access to the estate. He left without anger, understanding that accountability, not royal inclusion, was the only honorable response left to him. The closed gate became neither revenge nor rejection. It became a permanent boundary protecting memory from entitlement. Anne preserved the sanctuary. Charles upheld her decision. Camilla refused to divide the family over it. Tom accepted the consequence. The late queen's retreat remained silent, guarded, and untouched, and in honoring that silence, the family finally understood that love may offer forgiveness, but duty must still defend the door. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.